the city created a target-rich population, an area with a target-rich population for drug dealers, extortionists, people who prey on those vulnerable souls who will ultimately not continue to live on the street. They will die on the street.
One of the most thankless jobs in American business has to be that of business improvement director for Skid Row in Los Angeles, a few blocks east of downtown Los Angeles, where you have some of the nicest theaters, sporting complexes and all that. You have Skid Row, which is a place of just absolute degradation, dystopian nightmare of a place that really you can't do justice to unless you actually see it. I have been writing about that along with my reporting on fentanyl and methamphetamine, which play a huge role now in what Skid Row has become. One of the most fresh and frank opinions on the district is that held by Estela Lopez, who is in fact the business improvement director for Skid Row. She's been doing this for a lot of years, very tough woman, very thoughtful, very frank, as I said. And I've always enjoyed speaking with her about the history of the place and what it has become. Estela Lopez, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. It's been a fabulous education knowing you over the last several years and in hearing your story. I wanted others to hear it as well. I was wondering if you could take us through a little bit of the history of the zone.
The homeless issue of the downtown area in the 60s and the 70s was primarily single Caucasian males addicted to alcohol.
Right.
And there was a proliferation of liquor stores in the downtown area, at that time completely unregulated by the city. And so they sold the cheapest, Thunderbird or whatever. And these guys, for whatever they panhandled or whatever odd jobs they did during the day, they could certainly get their supply. That changed dramatically when alcohol shifted to drugs. That not only changed what the substance was, but it also changed the population. The population of Skid Row began to increasingly trend toward single Black males. Then the proximity of Skid Row to the jails in Los Angeles, the main central jail, made it a pipeline, a revolving pipeline. Those liquor stores were still here, but now you had meth, you also had cocaine, you also had heroin, you also had marijuana. I mean, it was a melange.
All that. My understanding was that crack really became the main drug in Skid Row around those years.
And it was the game changer. The gangs that were mostly inhabiting the south and south central sides of Los Angeles began to make a lucrative trade out of that. Now, in the background, the city of Los Angeles had decided that this population, and this started even further back in the 70s when it was still primarily Caucasian men addicted to alcohol. The city decided that it was indeed going to revitalize its downtown. Yeah. So the missions and the shelters that catered to them were moved further east. As I said to you, when I was a little girl, they were on Main Street. Well, the city provided them the land and the funding to move further east into what was then a thriving industrial zone, still downtown Los Angeles, but it was the industrial heart of downtown Los Angeles, very much involved with goods movement, items coming from the port, the airport. This was the area where manufacturing, where the produce mart was, the seafood markets were, all in the center of the city with good access to rail and vehicular transportation. So that's why this industrial district was here. But it also provided a very convenient place for the city leaders to push that problem. So it was pushed into a corner of the city where it didn't have to be seen or dealt with when it was still Caucasian males with alcohol. In the 80s, when crack came in, now you had drug dealers, gang members, very dangerous population coming in with a much more deadly addictive substance and the violence that comes with the sale of that substance. And it was all put in this, what became a tinderbox of 60 square blocks adjacent to, but still like another world away from the downtown high rises and the cultural, the music center, all of that seemed like a world away. It's only blocks away,
Right.
but it seemed like a world away
Yeah.
because the city leaders wanted it that way.
You know, it's interesting you say that. I've always been struck by Skid Row as this alternate universe. Yeah, you go down, even Broadway's very nice now. You got those theaters and stuff, and you've got this the sports arena, and that was Staples Center, whatever it is, and then you got Disney, and then you walk a few blocks, and it's an alarming thing to watch. One of the things that has always struck me about Skid Row that I definitely wanted to ask you about was just the utter proliferation and stationariness of all the tents. And
You used to have the quintessential homeless person with his cardboard, and I say he because they were mostly men at the time. The cardboard that they would lay
yes,
out in the doorways or under the awnings to keep away from the rain. Those cardboards became sleeping bags, became more bulky items, and ultimately tents. Industrial buildings are mostly windowless. And so this was a welcoming neighborhood where people could set up those tents and not block too many doorways or driveways. And again, the city was hands off, no enforcement.
yeah,
The tents, people would use them at night for sleep.
yeah,
And the only minimal enforcement was that the city would come or the police would come during the day and say, okay, boys, you have to break them down and keep moving. So there was for a time, an acknowledgement that, okay, fine, you can be there at night, but when the business is open, you've got to break it down, move
yeah,
along. And that was I don't want to call it a peaceful coexistence, but that's how the business needs were met to a degree, and nobody seemed to mind, and things just became that became the way of life.
yeah,
But in the the mid 1990s is when the civil rights groups and the homeless advocacy groups began to file their lawsuits against the city of Los Angeles for cruel and inhumane treatment of homeless individuals.
yeah,
Now, at the time, this business community certainly was up in arms over what they saw as a slippery slope.
yeah.
Looking back, I think that we could never have envisioned, even in our most dire predictions, what this area would turn into as a result of lawsuits and of the city capitulating its right to regulate the public right of way.
That's a fascinating story in itself. I think where gradually there's more and more um, right to retain property, and then on the part of people living on the street, and so eventually you get to, well, first personal property, and then a remarkable transformation that I think led to the more stationary nature of these tents was the idea that through the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, where you get approval, a sense to keep large, bulky, I guess, bulk items, meaning chairs and sofas and TVs and
It's not unusual to see generators, barbecues, in the summer, inflatable swimming pools. Really, there is no enforcement here. The sidewalks are completely blocked.
Yeah.
And the behavior that is also unchecked is dangerous to the people themselves as well as to the business community.
What did that stationariness of the tents do to the area, along with the drugs as well?
Well, it gave a sense of permanence to the homeless community that not only was this a place where that was allowed, but what I've seen over the years is that it's somewhat celebrated, and I really can't understand that piece of it. Even today, a police officer cannot go into a tent without a warrant
Yeah,
because this is considered someone's residence. Those tents are not all housing homeless individuals. They are housing very dangerous drug dealers. Here, I call Skid Row the Amazon clearinghouse for narcotics. You can buy anything you want.
right.
But now, of course, with fentanyl and trank and many other things that I never thought I'd become acquainted with, or have to be versed in, those are much deadlier drugs. The the city created a target-rich population, an area with a target-rich population for drug dealers, extortionists, people who prey on those vulnerable souls who will ultimately not continue to live on the street. They will die on the street. Right now, we have 7 people dying on the street, 7 homeless people dying on the street every single day in Los Angeles. And I dare say most of them are here in Skid Row. When the tents came in, and nothing was enforced against them. Now the drug dealers didn't have to drive in and drive out. They were able to set up shop and deal from these tents. And it's not only the tents. Much of the affordable housing here in Skid Row has been found to be a security problem in and of itself because the drug dealers will intimidate the guards at the door. The guards at the door don't want to die. And they will intimidate people who live in the units, and the units are used to store the drugs. They're used for prostitution. Um, this is what happens when lawlessness takes over.
Yeah.
And the city did not want to confront this issue, I believe, first and foremost, because of the demographics. When I said that the majority of the folks here were Black males, those confrontations are ugly anywhere, but certainly on television, and all of the ramifications from our history were certainly on the minds of our elected officials. But the
Yeah.
solution was not to allow this behavior to continue and for this area to become colonized as an area where anything goes. You can do anything you want. You can use and abuse people until
Right.
they die. And this
Oh,
is what continues to this very day.
one of the things I've written a lot about is the methamphetamine that's coming out of Mexico, extraordinarily potent and in relentless supplies, and creating addiction, but also creating pronounced mental illness, symptoms of schizophrenia, and so on. And I was wondering if it seems to me that now that meth has kind of taken the spot that crack used to occupy in Skid Row, just kind of aced out all it's become the drug on the street. And I was wondering if you remember when you began to see people not just addicted, but maybe out of their minds at this point, and doing wild, harmful stuff to them and others.
Thank you for asking, because there is so much that now myself, my team, those of us that business owners, the employees here, um, we consider it just a normal day to see people completely nude, running down the street, jumping on cars, screaming at themselves, tearing out their hair, jumping in and out of traffic on top of buses, scaling buildings, not wanting to come down from the roofs of buildings. This is everyday behavior here.
One of the things that also struck me, though, even before we met, was, and I very clear that it's a reflection of meth use, is a focus and an obsession with bicycles and bicycle parts, chains, wheels, frames,
And
you know.
again, because folks were allowed to keep personal property on the sidewalk, those bikes became part of their personal property, even though, of course, they were all stolen. Are all stolen because we still have that. So yes, they tear them apart, put them back together, tear them apart, sell the parts or sell it whole, but they're and these mountains of metal that will cover not only the sidewalk but will spill out into the street,
Yeah,
making it difficult to go down a street or to turn right. But it's all again allowed. There
right.
is no recapturing of the public right of way. We have a gentleman right now about 4 blocks from my office who has exactly that, a mountain of bikes as well as other metal pieces. There's a lot of copper wire theft in this area, metals that are ultimately taken to a recycler, but it's the dismantling of the city's infrastructure for its parts.
Right.
And it is meth driven, and they're also commodities that are worth something in the recycling trade.
I'm wondering what you see as any potential beginnings of solutions to.
Is there light at the end of the tunnel? I don't see it. I
Yeah,
don't see it. I see, just like everyone does, the mismanagement of billions of dollars in funding that have been appropriated for this issue. Um, just today, as we record this, the sales tax in Los Angeles County has gone up again. And the voters approved this because they want solutions. They want the city and the county of Los Angeles to find a way to help these people, but help them in a way that they're not continuing to live on the street.
yeah,
Whereas the city and the county, from again my on the street vantage point, seems to be seems to embrace uh, the approach of, well, we have to meet people where they are. Fine, but somehow we seem to be leaving them where they are rather than helping them, those who can, um, reclaim sobriety. Many of the folks on Skid Row may never get to that place because you and I have spoken about this. How many times do you bring someone back with Narcan before their brain is irreparably damaged,
right.
right? And how many years can they be addicted till they're irreparably damaged? Um, but the city and county are funding programs that drive up and down the streets of Skid Row, handing out drug paraphernalia under programs that are, this catch-all phrase of harm reduction, which, if you're as old as I am, you remember was started back in the 80s during the HIV crisis, and we wanted people to be using clean needles, and we wanted to stem the growth of HIV. But right now, we're not talking about that. We are talking about dangerous drugs that will kill you, not may kill you, will kill you. And the city and county of Los Angeles are maybe true to their mission of meeting people where they're at, but they're meeting them by handing them drug paraphernalia. And behind them come the drug dealers. I don't look.
Right.
I'm going outside of my lane. That is not part of my job description to understand that. And I'm not a physician, but it certainly makes me shake my head as to whether we are working towards an outcome that can help those individuals to reclaim an independence in life, an independence away from addiction, those that can. Uh, um, Or are we simply meeting them where they're at? And like I said, leaving them there. Women who have addiction and are pregnant have had babies in the gutter here. Infants have been rescued from here with fentanyl in their system.
Yeah.
How are we to continue to say that what we're doing is working? Show me, and I don't mean show me a report. I don't want a bar graph. I don't want a pie chart. I'm here every damn day. Show me that what you are doing, city and county of Los Angeles, is working, because I am watching people die every single day.
You've been doing this now almost 25 years. How do you get up in the morning and come to work?
I am a creature of Los Angeles, born and raised, and I am more than hurt. I am offended by what the city is allowing to happen. The work in an industrial district starts very early. 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning is like noon for you and me. They're blue collar jobs, but these guys work hard with their backs and with their hands, loading and unloading, shipping and moving and delivering. And they work long hours. And when they get here at 4 or 5 in the morning, it's dark, and they never know what they're going to confront. A drug deal gone bad, a dead body on their driveway. That's their reality. But yet they show up and they're here. And in the discussion of Skid Row, you don't hear those stories. And so I've made it my mission to not allow the city, or frankly, journalists such as yourself, to forget that when the homeless people were forcibly moved into Skid Row by the city, no one moved the businesses out. They are here, and they have been disrespected and ignored. And they have to put up with violent situations, with fires started by the homeless, by a constant threat that someone in the throes of a substance is going to rush into their loading dock or into their store and is going to threaten their employees or their customers. Life is always on the edge here, whether you live on the street or work inside. Life is always on the edge. And these people show up every single day. And I feel it's my duty to show up every single day for them.
Estela Lopez, thanks so much for taking some time. It's always an education.
Thank you.
Okay, then. That was Estela Lopez, Business Improvement Director for Skid Row, Los Angeles. Never a dull conversation with her. I've talked with her many a time. And please subscribe to my Dreamland newsletter at samquinones.substack.com. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is True Tales Video, all one word. Hope you go there and subscribe. And I will see you guys on the next one.